Hello, I'm Shannon Tiezi from the Diplomat, and I'm here today at the Stimson Center in Washington, D.C., where I'm happy to be joined by Mr. Alan Romberg. Mr. Romberg is a distinguished fellow and the director of the East Asia program here at the Stimson Center. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Today, Alan's going to be talking with us about the local elections that took place in Taiwan on November 29th. The ruling Chinese Nationalist Party, or the KMT, suffered a resounding defeat, holding on to only 6 out of 22 seats at the mayor and county magistrate level. So to start with, Alan, could you just talk us through what you think were the main driving factors behind the KMT losses in these elections?
I think you frame it correctly when you talk about KMT losses and the KMT defeat. One has to give credit to the opposition Democratic Progressive Party, or the DPP, for what they did in terms of successful campaigning, and for the independent candidate in Taipei who had DPP backing. But basically, I think this was a rejection, or at least a rebuke to the KMT for what people see as failed governance, for being in office too long and not producing the results that they wanted. There are a number of local factors that came in. These were local elections, after all, so in the municipalities where they took place, the candidates, the issues were, in fact, largely local. I think there's a background factor, though, of a sense of the KMT as a whole really not producing for Taiwan society and for the Taiwan economy what people were looking for.
Now, obviously, from the more global perspective, there's a tendency to read into this a rejection of the KMT's Cross-Strait policies. Do you think that, given that these were local elections, that Cross-Strait policies were a big issue, or more voters more concerned about economics, food safety scandals, and other issues of local governance?
Right. I think more of the latter, but I think there's a background factor here of Cross-Strait policy. That is, a lot of people feel that the way that the administration, the Ma Ying-jeou administration, has been negotiating with the mainland has not been to the advantage, shall we say, of most people in Taiwan. I'm not arguing that that's necessarily a correct view, but I think that that is a perception, or at least there are a lot of suspicions that that is what's going on, that the deals which have been struck have benefited the haves and not the have-nots. So that's a factor, but I don't think this was a referendum on cross-strait policy per se and cross-strait relations. That's going to become a factor in the 2016 elections when the presidency and the legislature seats are up for grabs.
Now, as you mentioned, these elections were local. The presidential elections, the legislators will not be elected until 2016. So given that, what is the actual political impact of these elections on KMT governance going forward?
Well, we'll have to see, but we've already witnessed the legislative caucus of the KMT saying, well, we will obviously cooperate with the administration, but we're going to basically not be told by the executive branch what we should be doing. I think there's been a tendency to feel that they have been sort of the junior partner, and they're saying basically, no, we're not going to do that anymore. I think we've seen some evidence of dissatisfaction on the part of some of the candidates who lost, KMT candidates, with the leadership at the center. Again, whether these are justified or not is really not the question, at least the one I'm addressing. But there is this sense of a need to have fresh leadership, and as we know, Ma Ying-jeou, while retaining his presidency, has stepped down as chair of the KMT. Who will replace him is an issue that's going to be decided over the next month or so, and we don't know who's going to want to run for that office. It may not be the best thing to be doing, although traditionally the chairman of the party has a leg up when it comes to being the nominee for the presidency in the forthcoming election. But I think that within the KMT we're going to see some shuffling and some finger pointing and some realignment of the powers that be. A number of the vice chair of the KMT already resigned. Some of them stayed on in response to requests from Ma not to just let the party collapse. Wu Dan-yi, who is the acting chairman of the party at the moment, is among those. Some people have already announced that or made known their availability to be chair. The losing mayor of Taichung City, Jason Hu, has said, well, I've turned it down in the past, but if people want me to do it, I would be available. I've seen a report that Eric Zhu, who's the successful mayor for re-election in New Taipei, has also made a similar statement. In his case, it's a little trickier, perhaps, because he is considered to be one of the more viable presidential candidates, and how he sees the role of KMT chair in a possible bid for the presidency or for the nomination is something we'll have to see unfold in the weeks to come.
As we head into this sort of leadership reshuffling with the KMT, there's been some talk of the possibility of political infighting within the party. Do you think that this could spill over to hurt the KMT's chances in the 2016 election, the way the infighting between Lian Zhan and James Song hurt the party in the 2000 elections?
I think it could. I think we have to see how this plays out. But there's always been some tension, for example, between the local KMT chapters and the center, the central party organization. I don't think that's going to go away. Whether, in fact, in a move to succeed in 2016, especially in not only the presidency but the legislature, people decide they really need to pull together, particularly in the wake of this debacle, I can't say. I can see people thinking they ought to do that, but I can also see people saying, hey, I'm after my seat, I'm not really concerned about yours.
So with the KMT suffering a defeat and President Ma Ying-jeou resigning his position as chairman of the party, do you think he's effectively a lame duck at this point, and he's just going to have to serve out these remaining 2 years without really being able to put through new initiatives?
I wouldn't want to make a really hard and fast judgment about that. First of all, by the way, it's only going to be a year plus at this point, right? If the election particularly is in January of 2016, which is a broad expectation, we're in November, December right now, so it's a little more than a year. In any case, I think that there has been a sense in the mainland since well before this election that given the stalemate in the legislature over a services trade agreement that was negotiated a year and a half ago between Taiwan and the mainland, given the power of the sunflower movement last spring, that the ability to really take broad, significant initiatives with the Ma administration was going to be limited in any case. I think saying lame duck is perhaps taking it too far. I mean, the presidency has certain powers, although we've seen that when it involves the legislature, they are quite willing to enforce their prerogatives. And one of the interesting things about Taiwan's legislature is even though the KMT has a majority of seats, they have not been able to push through their own agenda. There are various parliamentary moves that have enabled the DPP to stymie things, and with the Speaker of the legislature not being willing to enforce hard rules in some cases, that really has made it difficult for President Ma at this point even to push through his agenda. So we'll just have to see, but I wouldn't say he has no powers, and I would also say that when you look at cross-strait policy, and we may want to get to that, people in Taiwan have concerns, but they also understand the importance of the cross-strait relationship to their own well-being. So it isn't as if there's no support for continuing dealings on a successful basis with the mainland, but there is a wariness about it.
Mm-hmm. So when Beijing is watching these elections in Taipei, do you think that there's serious concern there about the future of the cross-strait relationship? Beijing has historically not been very keen on dealing with the Taiwan's opposition party, the DPP.
Yeah, I think there is concern. I don't know how far to take it at this point. We'll see. But as you say, the opposition has not been willing, for example, to embrace a one China approach, which Beijing has made clear is a very important foundational principle of the agreements, the 21 agreements that have been reached over the last six and a half years. So, yeah, I think the mainland is concerned what happens if the DPP gets elected, if this anti-KMT mood carries over from local level to island-wide level, and the DPP comes into office without some kind of a one China approach. So what will the mainland do about it? Hard to see. What will the DPP do about it? I think that they are going to try to make it clear that they're not a radical policy party. That is, they're not going to go for Taiwan independence, even though that is their long-term objective. That's what they favor. But that's not a today, a here and now kind of an issue. So I think they're going to try to persuade the United States, as well as the mainland, as well as the Taiwan voters, that they can manage cross-strait relations in a sensible way. Whether Beijing is going to be willing to deal with a DPP administration, should they win in 2016, if it has not embraced some form of one China, is something to be seen. But I think they are concerned about it, and they have reiterated in quite recent days that embracing one China and rejecting Taiwan independence are fundamental aspects of a successful cross-strait relationship.
Do you think that the DPP has been able to successfully promote counter policies to the KMT that the Taiwan people are willing to accept, or are we mostly just seeing anti-KMT sentiments, not pro-DPP?
Polls show that there has not been a great movement to the DPP or to the pan-green coalitions. So I think that the DPP has its work cut out for it to convince people that they are capable of governing in the interests of everybody. Obviously, the DPP would say their position on various domestic issues is better, it's fairer, and so on and so forth. But again, looking at polls, it is yet to be proven that the people in Taiwan have accepted the DPP as a worthy successor. So when you look, for example, a recent poll came out and it showed that the KMT and the DPP were within 1 point of each other. Now, polls are polls, and you have to take them as they are, but this one is generally considered to be a pretty good indicator of where things are. On cross-strait issues, I think that the challenge for the DPP is also pretty significant, because last time the PRC made it clear that they did not think that the DPP had a policy, a cross-strait policy, that was going to work. And they have already, in this campaign season, criticized some aspects of the DPP's approach to cross-strait relations. And said, in fact, some aspects, literally, they said, won't work. So we're going to have to see what the DPP does, how they are able to counter the impression that they do not have a workable cross-strait approach, and then how the PRC itself reacts to it. And a lot of people would then look to the United States and say, how is the United States going to react to this as well? So I don't think there's anything that's carved in stone yet about any of this. And certainly the results of the local elections and the very strong, what I would consider to be rebuff to the KMT, would tend to augur well for the DPP. But they've actually been quite cautious in the way they've talked about the implications of this election for their own chances, the DPP's chances in 2016. I think that's fully merited.
Well, unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for today, Alan. But thank you so much for talking through some of Taiwan's domestic politics with us.
My pleasure.
And thank you for tuning in. Once again, I'm Shannon Tiezi from The Diplomat.